Bible in a Year, the Message Version, April 1st. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 1 through chapter 20, verse 20. The Levitical priests, that's the entire tribe of Levi, don't get any land inheritance with the rest of Israel. They get the fire gift offerings of God. They will live on that inheritance, but they don't get land inheritance like the rest of their kinsmen. God is their inheritance. This is what the priests get from the people from any offering of an ox or sheep: the shoulder, 2 cheeks, and the stomach. You must always give them the first fruits of your grain, wine, and oil, and the first fleece of your sheep, because God, your God, has chosen only them and their children out of all your tribes to be present and serve always in the name of God, your God. If a Levite moves from any town in Israel and is quite free to move wherever he desires, and comes to the place God designates for worship, he may serve there in the name of God along with all his brother Levites who are present and serving in the presence of God. And he will get an equal share to eat, even though he has money from the sale of his parents' possessions. When you enter the land that God, your God, is giving you, don't take on an abominable ways of life of the nations there. Don't you dare sacrifice your sons or daughters in the fire. Don't practice divination, sorcery, fortune telling, witchery, casting spells, holding seances, or channeling with the dead. People who do these things are an abomination to God. It's because of just such abominable practices that God, your God, is driving these nations out before you. Be completely loyal to God, your God. These nations that you're about to run out of the country consort with sorcery and witches, but not you. God, your God, forbids it. God, your God, is going to raise up a prophet for you. God will raise him up from among your kinsmen, a prophet like me. Listen obediently to him. This is what you ask God, your God, for at Horeb on the day that you were all gathered at the mountain, and said, "We can't hear any more from God, our God. We can't stand seeing any more fire. We'll die." And God said to me, "They're right. They've spoken the truth. I'll raise up for them a prophet like you from their kinsmen. I'll tell them what to say, and he will pass on to them everything I command him. Anyone who won't listen to my words spoken by him, I will personally hold responsible. But any prophet who fakes it, who claims to speak in my name something I haven't commanded him to say, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet must die." You may be wondering among yourselves, how can we tell the difference, whether it was God who spoke or not? Here's how. If what the prophet spoke in God's name doesn't happen, then obviously God wasn't behind it. The prophet made it up. Forget about him. When God, your God, throws the nations out of the country that God, your God, is giving you, and you settle down in their cities and houses, you are to set aside 3 easily accessible cities in the land that God, your God, is giving you as your very own. Divide your land into thirds. This land that God, your God, is giving you to possess, and build roads to the towns so that anyone who accidentally kills another can flee there. This is the guideline for the murderer who flees there to take refuge. He has to have killed his neighbor without premeditation and with no history of bad blood between them. For instance, a man goes with his neighbor into the woods to cut a tree. He swings the axe. The head slips off the handle and hits his neighbor, killing him. He may then flee to one of those cities and save his life. If the city is too far away, the avenger of blood racing in hot, blooded pursuit might catch him since it's such a long distance, and kill him even though he didn't deserve it. It wasn't his fault. There was no history of hatred between them. Therefore, I command you, set aside 3 cities for yourselves. When God your God enlarges your land, extending its borders, as he solemnly promised your ancestors, by giving the whole land he promised them, because you are diligently living the way that I'm commanding you today, namely, to love God your God and do what he tells you all your life. And when that happens, then add 3 more of these 3 cities, so that there is no chance of innocent blood being spilled in your land. God your God is giving you this land as an inheritance. You don't want to pollute it with innocent blood and bring guilt upon yourselves. On the other hand, if a man with a history of hatred toward his neighbor waits in ambush, then jumps him, mauls and kills him, and then runs to one of these cities, that's a different story. The elders of his own city are to send for him and have him brought back. They are to hand him over to the avenger of blood for execution. Don't feel sorry for him. Clean out the pollution of wrongful murder from Israel so that you'll be able to live well and breathe clean air. Don't move your neighbor's boundary markers, the long-standing landmarks set up by your pioneer ancestors defining their property. You cannot convict anyone of a crime or sin on the word of one witness. You need 2 or 3 witnesses to make a case. If a hostile witness stands to accuse someone of a wrong, then both parties involved in the quarrel must stand in the presence of God before the priests and judges who are in office at that time. The judges must conduct a careful investigation. If the witness turns out to be a false witness and has lied against his fellow Israelite, give him the same medicine he intended for the other party. Clean the pollution evil from the company. People will hear of what you've done and be impressed. That will put a stop to this kind of evil among you. Don't feel sorry for the person. It's life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. When you go to war against your enemy and see horses and chariots and soldiers far outnumbering you, do not recoil in fear of them. God, your God, who brought you up out of Egypt, is with you. When the battle is about to begin, let the priest come forward and speak to the troops. He'll say, "Attention, Israel. In a few minutes, you're going to do battle with your enemies. Don't waver in resolve. Don't fear. Don't hesitate. Don't panic. God, your God, is right there with you, fighting with you against your enemies, fighting to win." Then let the officers step up and speak to the troops. Is there a man here who has built a new house but hasn't yet dedicated it? Let him go home right now, lest he die in battle and another man dedicated it. And is there a man here who has planted a vineyard but hasn't yet enjoyed the grapes? Let him go home right now, lest he die in battle and another man enjoy the grapes. Is there a man here engaged to be married who hasn't yet taken his wife? Let him go home right now, lest he die in battle and another man take her. The officers will then continue. And is there a man here who is wavering in resolve and afraid? Let him go home right now so that he doesn't infect his fellows with his timidity and cowardly spirit. When the officers have finished speaking to the troops, let them appoint commanders of the troops who shall muster them. by units. When you come up against a city to attack it, call out, "Peace?" If they answer, "Yes, peace," and open the city to you, then everyone found there will be conscripted as forced laborers and work for you. But if they don't settle for peace and insist on war, then go ahead and attack. God, your God, will give them to you. Kill all the men with your swords, but don't kill the women and children and animals. Everything inside the town you can take as plunder for you and use and eat. God, your God, gives it to you. This is the way you deal with the distant towns, the towns that don't belong to the nations at hand. But with the towns of people that God your God is giving you as an inheritance, it's different. Don't leave anyone alive. Consign them to holy destruction: the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, obeying the commandment of God your God. This is so there won't be any of them left to teach you to practice the abominations that they engage in with their gods, and you end up sinning against God your God. When you mount an attack on a town and the siege goes on a long time, don't start cutting down the trees, swinging your axes against them. Those trees are your future food. Don't cut them down. Are trees soldiers who come against you with weapons? The exception can be those trees which don't produce food. You can chop them down and use the timbers to build siege enemies against the town that is resisting you until it falls. Luke chapter 9, verse 28 through verse 50. About 8 days after saying this, he, Jesus, climbed the mountain to pray, taking Peter, John, and James along. While he was in prayer, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became blinding white. At once, 2 men were there talking with him. They turned out to be Moses and Elijah. And what a glorious appearance they made! They talked over his exodus, the one Jesus was about to complete in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Peter and those with him were slumped over in sleep. When they came to, rubbing their eyes, they saw Jesus in his glory and the 2 men standing with him. When Moses and Elijah had left, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, this is a great moment. Let's build 3 memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He blurted this out without thinking. While he was babbling on like this, a light, radiant cloud enveloped them. As they found themselves buried in the cloud, they became deeply aware of God. Then there was a voice out of the cloud. "This is my son, the chosen. Listen to him." When the sound of the voice died away, they saw Jesus there alone. They were speechless, and they continued speechless, said not one thing to anyone during those days of what they had seen. When they came down off the mountain the next day, a big crowd was there to meet them. A man called from out of the crowd, "Please, please, teacher, take a look at my son. He's my only child. Often a spirit seizes him. Suddenly he's screaming, thrown into convulsions, his mouth foaming, and then it beats him black and blue before it leaves. I asked your disciples to deliver him, but they couldn't." Jesus said, "What a generation. No sense of God, no focus to your lives. How many times do I have to go over these things? How much longer do I have to put up with this? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon slammed him to the ground and threw him into convulsions. Jesus stepped in, ordered the foul spirit gone, healed the boy, and handed him back to his father. They all shook their heads in wonder, astonished at God's greatness, God's majestic greatness. While they continued to stand around exclaiming over all the things he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, "Treasure and ponder each of these next words. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into human hands." They didn't get what he was saying. It was like he was speaking a foreign language, and they couldn't make heads or tail of it. But they were embarrassed to ask him what it meant. They started arguing over which of them would be most famous. When Jesus realized how much this mattered to them, he brought a child to his side. "Whoever accepts this child as the child accepts me," he said. "And whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me." You become great by accepting, not asserting. Your spirit, not your size, makes the difference. John spoke up. "Master, we saw a man using your name to expel demons, and we stopped him because he wasn't part of our group." Jesus said, "Don't stop him. If he's not an enemy, he's an ally." Psalm chapter 73, verse 1 through verse 28. An SF psalm. No doubt about it, God is good. Good to good people, good to the good-hearted. But I nearly missed it, missed seeing his goodness. I was looking the other way, looking up to the people at the top, envying the wicked who have it made, who have nothing to worry about, not a care in the whole wide world. Pretentious with arrogance, they wear the latest fashions in violence, pampered and overfed, decked out in silk bows of silliness. They jeer using words to kill. They bully their way with words. They're full of hot air, loudmouths disturbing the peace. People actually listen to them. Can you believe it? Like thirsty puppies, they lap up their words. What's going on here? Is God out to lunch? Nobody's tending the store. The wicked get by with everything. They have it made, piling up riches. I've been stupid to play by the rules. What has it gotten me? A long run of bad luck, that's what. A slap in the face every time I walk out the door. If I had given in and talked like this, I would have betrayed your dear children. Still, when I try and figure it out, all I got was a splitting headache. Until I entered the sanctuary of God, then I saw the whole picture. The slippery road you've been put on, with a final crash and a ditch of delusion. In the blink of an eye, disaster, a blind curve in the dark, a nightmare. We wake up and rub our eyes, nothing. There's nothing to them, and there never was. When I, beleaguered and bitter, totally consumed by envy, I was totally ignorant, a dumb ox, in your very presence. I'm still in your presence, but you've taken my hand. You wisely and tenderly led me, and then you bless me. You're all I want in heaven. You're all I want on earth. When my skin sags and my bones get brittle, God is rock firm and faithful. Look, those who left you are falling apart. Deserters, they'll never be heard from again. But I'm in the very presence of God. Oh, how refreshing it is. I've made Lord God my home. God, I'm telling the world what you do. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 10. Good people are good to their animals. The good-hearted, bad people kick and abuse them. This was a daily reading from the Message version of the Bible, brought to you and read by Bible in a Year.